de paix, d'amitié pour la vie.
Welcome back, and moving on to our first segment for today. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi participated at the 6th session of the Association Summit between the African Union and the EU, which takes place on the 17th and 18th of February in the headquarters of the EU in Brussels. Well, many important files were discussed during this important summit, and of course, President al-Sisi talked about many different challenging points that we're going to discuss right now with our guest, Dr. Youmn Hamaki, Professor of Economics at Shams University. Doctor, good morning.
Good morning, Nash.
So, Doctor, first of all, I'd like to shed the light on the importance of the participation of President Assisi in this important meeting, especially that they described the visit itself as unprecedented.
Yes, actually, President Assisi, during the presidency of Egypt to the African Union, exerted great effort towards the positioning of Africa into the world economy, which means that discussing, the vision of Africa 2063, changing, the position of Africa in the world economy from just a source of raw materials into the industrialization of Africa. The role of youth, addressing challenges like, terrorism, extremism in the continent, arming conflict towards peace, because peace can be considered as a prerequisite for any economic growth. Changing, the perception of Africa regarding how to develop its resources and use it efficiently. We have some, astonishing figures regarding Africa. Like Africa is a major producer of energy, and at the same time half of population cannot have adequate energy sources for their living lives. Most of a large part cannot find clean water and for cooking and so on. So the continent is suffering actually from poverty to large extent, and you have the phenomena of feminization of poverty. Women are suffering a lot in the continent. From here it comes that human resource development can be considered as a major priority to enhance the situation, besides the industrialization of the continent and exploiting resources efficiently. And during the presidency of Egypt, all these issues have been discussed quite well, and beside efforts have been done towards moving into the free trade area among all African countries, which is soon going to take place and to be activated for the benefit of the population in the continent. So from here it comes that we know quite well, as on a win-win situation, the challenges confronting the continent and how to address such challenges. And after the pandemic, COVID-19, these challenges has been exaggerated, because nowadays we have another challenge confronting the continent, which needs more interest to human development and human, specifically regarding the health condition and to how extent the continent has been affected by such pandemic. So from here it comes the importance of such a gathering, and naturally we can see that the majority of major economies nowadays, like United States, like China, like all other countries, are gaining interest towards having more cooperation with the African continent, because the continent is quite rich of resources, that the major economies are in deep need to such resources. But changing the condition of cooperation from exploitation into partnership is a major, issue that should be discussed in such summit.
Yes, there were talks about the mechanism to be adopted so as to make this link or an integrated part when it comes to the economic integration with the global economy?
Yes, yes. And the EU nowadays is in a turning point, actually. We can see EU countries after the pandemic, they are managing to address the pandemic. Their economies are getting better, but they have severe challenges, political challenges regarding, the conflicts that we have in Ukraine nowadays, and jeopardizing to large extent, to how extent the continent is receiving gas and oil, and this may affect seriously their potentiality for achieving economic growth and addressing actually the pandemic. From here it comes that the diffusion and more cooperation with countries of the world based on win-win situation, I believe can be considered as a very important priority for the EU countries nowadays. And if we add to that the EU countries has dedicated 300 billion euro for the coming period till 2027 in an initiative called, the Gate of the World. Like the Belt and the Roads that developed by China in order to, enhance international cooperation, specifically in infrastructure. And we all know that infrastructure can be considered as a priority for the African continent. As we mentioned, we need roads, specifically the landlocked countries in Africa, that they are deprived from opportunities of trade and investment and so on. So infrastructure needs huge investment in the continent. And if we add to that climate change, taking into consideration that Egypt is having COP27 this year, and Egypt is going to represent actually the challenges confronting the continent regarding climate change. We all know that the continent has been affected seriously by climate change. Despite that, we didn't, as a continent, contribute to the emission responsible for the climate change nowadays, or changing temperature. And from here it comes that it needs another perception towards how to cooperate with the world economy in addressing such pandemics. So as Egypt is going to represent the continent, what are the projects? Clean energy. We have a lot of potentialities in the continent to cooperate with large companies in Europe regarding hydrogen, regarding renewable energy. And these are the topics actually that are going to take place in such summit, how to enhance cooperation between the two sides on a win-win situation, attracting investment. We all know that still we have severe challenges in the continent regarding attracting foreign direct investment. Conflict, bureaucracy, corruption, all these can be considered as obstacles. But besides, the continent has managed to address such obstacles and to try to change the climate of investment. From here it comes that we need another, generation of cooperation in which, or based on win-win and addressing the challenges confronting the world economy. Nowadays, national globalization has changed completely. It's not just by interdependence and outsourcing like we have witnessed during the pandemic, the value chain and how has been affected by the pandemic. And nowadays, all countries of the world are changing the perception of globalization. Instead of just a complete reliance, regionalism is gaining importance nowadays. So from here it comes that when you talk about Africa in relation with the EU countries, this partnership actually needs to be built on mutual benefits and addressing challenges, and at the meantime exploiting the resources existing.
Yes, that's why President Assisi was very keen on this and raising the issue of the climate change. And I think also we have the Africa-Europe investment package, and it includes one of which is the climate change and how it is going to affect the region, as of course you
Yes,
mentioned.
I like to comment on what you have mentioned regarding what President Assisi has mentioned in Egypt's the conference of Egypt's of petrol, just this week. He mentioned a very important fact, which is the continent, are suffering nowadays from the impact of the emissions actually done by major economies like the United States, Europe, and China. And nowadays, if you are going to use, in your policies as developed countries with the African continent, like, for example, carbon tax. Carbon tax, it's actually punishing those who are, not complying with, climate change requirement, or addressing the high temperature or emissions, generally speaking. And if you do that with African countries that are trying to develop their competitiveness nowadays and to export to you on a mutual basis of benefit, I think this is going to be quite, against the African countries. And from here it comes that we have to revise our policies, which means that if we are not responsible for such emission, we shouldn't be affected by such tax. And at the same time, we should have more, foreign aid towards, in order to comply with, the requirement of climate change. And I believe these are the major topics that are going to be discussed in the summit, to how extent we can manage helping the continent to develop their resources efficiently and at the same time addressing, the main challenge.
Talking about this important summit and how it can pave the way for more economic development, talking about the deeply relation between AU and EU.
I believe that there are a lot to be done regarding that. The summit is going to discuss a lot of topics in order to achieve more cooperation and more relation between the two sides. Like youth, for example. And Nashwa, that Egypt has done a lot regarding youth summit and gathering from all parts of the world, including
the World
Africa,
Youth Forum, yes.
And to how extent Egypt, our academy here, managed to train leaders in the African continent to help them to support economic development in their countries. I believe these efforts actually, when we are going to enhance the role of youth in the continent in cooperation with the EU countries, this is one perception. Another regarding economic policy. So responsible in different institutions are going to gather regarding to how extent policies are affected, can affect the relations. Another thing is regarding civil society in the zoo side, B2B business, what are the potentialities of investments going for the interest of both sides and they can achieve mutual benefit between the two sides. What are the topics? And I believe on top of these topics are transfer of technology, green economy, renewable energy inside.
Yes,
and
the
all these
president-
topics are quite important.
President also met with a number of Belgian companies on cooperation in the field of green hydrogen,
Yes.
producing or production for power generation. What's the impact of this on the Egyptian economy, and how far can this be something that is really of great importance, one of the main pillars, if we can put it like this, of economy?
Yes, Egypt nowadays, doing quite important efforts regarding, the transformation into green economy. And I believe that we have the largest project in Bimban regarding solar energy. And nowadays we are trying to transfer technology so that we can manufacture the panels. And we have a very good potentiality of that. So by having, the experience, the industry, completing the value chain of such industry, we can transfer all these experts into the African continent. So we can be here as Egypt the hub of investment coming from Europe towards the continent by using, based on, comparative advantage. So this is a very important, facts that we have to take into consideration. And I believe that President Assisi, by meeting, the largest company responsible for that in Brussels, I believe that this is a part of what we are talking about. So this is number one. Number two, regarding a lot of projects that Egypt has, done quite well during the last period regarding recycling of water, and this is actually, all these are quite important. Regarding, beside the hydrogen. Hydrogen, specifically green hydrogen, nowadays is taking quite important momentum in Egypt, and we are discussing in the economic zone of Suez Canal nowadays several opportunities for foreign investment to come and to and all these activities are taking place before COP27. So we are preparing quite well to be presenting, to represent Africa in COP27, addressing, addressing the main challenges confronting the continent. And as for our studies as economists, one of the issues that have been raised during COP26, that developing countries, are not, or they do not have, calibers and efficient calibers to write proposals so that to ask for, fund and sources of finance. We have, as John Kerry has mentioned several times in this gathering, we have a severe shortage in finance. When we talk about green economy, it needs huge investments. And, we all know quite well that the African continent and developing countries are suffering from lack of investment. And from here it comes that we need to ask about how to find sources, suitable sources of finance, and part of it is when developed countries in Paris 2015, when they signed the Sustainable Development Goals and the commitment of countries of the world for these goals, they mentioned that developing countries are in deep need to support in order to cope with the requirement of climate change. And I believe all these topics should be discussed in the summit. What African continent can do, how to upgrade skills, how to develop their capacity building regarding human resources so that they can benefit from such support from developed countries.
Doctor, the trade exchange between Egypt and Belgium, definitely we can see that still we can see an increase, about 70 point something,
Yes.
or 70.1 around increase. So how do you see this? And definitely there are more potentialities.
Yes, Brussels is the core of, we have a lot of institutions regarding the European Union in Brussels. And when we talk about Brussels as a very important European country, we need to know that our partnership with Europe actually, when you evaluate according to our studies as economists, actually we have a very severe deficit of in the balance of trade, which means that we are importing from the European Union triple what we can export, and this means that we need to activate our relationship with the European countries. I believe that a lot can be done regarding attracting investment and encouraging those European multinational to export their product. I believe a lot can be done regarding that, since all what we are talking about nowadays, we are revising, the partnership with Europe nowadays under revision to start a new era in which from 2021 to 2027, I believe that all these issues should be discussed, because still we have a lot of potentialities regarding to, our relation with Europe that are not actually exploited, attracting more European investment, finding in the European market more potentialities for export, developing our competitiveness. So when we talk about Belgium and the increase, actually our export to Belgium didn't exceed €2 billion. So still quite minimal compared to the potentialities of enhancing our trade relations. So a lot of work should be done, and I believe such occasions are quite important to discuss what are the obstacles, how these obstacles can be addressed properly so that we can activate our relation. And after the pandemic, the world is not anymore like before. So it needs from all of us to cooperate in order to address challenges.
Doctor, how do you see the role of the EU when it comes to the achievement of the 2030 UN Sustainable Development Vision?
The EU is doing quite well. We have Germany specifically, they are exerting and they are quite successful to transfer into quite renewable energy. And actually Egypt is benefiting from the German experience regarding generating solar energy and integrating solar energy with a total grid of electric energy. So the EU countries are doing quite well. They have a lot of initiatives that we can cooperate as African with the EU and as Egypt with the EU. I believe a lot of potentialities, and we have a lot of initiative, Nashwa, that needs to be activated. What we are lacking, a mechanism of monitoring and evaluation, because we sign a lot of MOU, and we are talking about a lot of initiatives, but still the impact is not as it should be. So by having a very active and efficient mechanism of monitoring and evaluation between the two sides, this is my recommendation when we revise our agreement with the EU, to have such a mechanism so that to discuss what are the obstacles, why we are not achieving the results as it should be, and how to address such obstacles.
Right. Just allow me, Doctor. We have a phone call with Dr. Ibrahim Al-Ghazawi, Professor of International Relations. Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning, Doctor. So actually, let me first of all ask you about all the important political issues that were raised during the summit in Brussels.
Well, I think concerns of African continent are so many, but on top of them, at least for Egypt, as a leading country in the continent. Of course, concerns coming from the problems or crisis in Libya, illegal immigration, and sustainable development in African countries, adds to the concerns of Egypt and priorities of Egyptian state today concerning development, infrastructure developing, opening the Egyptian investment market for the European companies and investors, and of course the renewable energy challenge today, as the whole world today is suffering from climate change and trying to mobilize efforts to put a decisive control over this deterioration in climate, comes the challenge of green energy and clean renewable energy sources as a challenge not only on Egypt but actually on the whole world of countries. So it has to be sort of continuous cooperation using the available technologies and also spurring new inventions in that field, because definitely the whole world needs this today.
Right. Doctor, the summit also tackled how or the role of Europe in confronting COVID in Egypt. And not only in Egypt, of course, in the African continent. And we all know how Egypt achieved a lot when it comes to confronting COVID in Egypt and the production of the vaccine. Actually, Egypt was very successful in all the procedures adopted in confronting the COVID-19. So let's discuss this or shed the light on this important part.
It's, I would say, a massive challenge that Egypt faces today, and not only Egypt, the whole world indeed. With the available statistics that clearly states that Egypt is doing very good in terms of confronting this epidemic disease with the different solutions and strenuous efforts to control the spread of this the virus in Egypt. Yes, we have a good a positive lesson in terms of the healthcare services in Egypt that today, until today, are very much proving to be strong enough to confront this virus and this epidemic. And there is, of course, need to cooperate with the European Union and with the whole world to, as this is a universal challenge indeed. It's not Egyptian or African or European. It's a whole world challenge, and there must be more and more mobilization of available resources, financial, health, innovative, and everything in the whole world, especially European side, with their advanced technology techniques and research institutions, whether in American, Canada, or European side. The whole world should be mobilizing their efforts to confront this real challenge.
Doctor, how do you see the AU-EU summit impact on the region, and talking about its impact not only in Egypt, of course, I'm talking about the whole continent. How do you see this?
We do need, not only in the region, I have to say, but the whole African countries, we do need to strengthen more and more the ties with the European continent, with the European Union countries. And as things unfold in the last years about challenges facing Egyptian, all Egypt, whether Egyptian or Arab African countries or whole continent of Africa, the whole countries in the continent, we do have a real need to strengthen more the relations with European countries. We face a lot of challenges. Most of African countries in the middle or in the south, they have some sort of internal clashes or armed conflicts or whatever. So there is real need to cooperate to put an end to these internal issues that devastate these countries' economies and make life for their individuals truly impossible inside these countries, and that is where the immigration to European countries through the northern African countries with Egypt on top of these countries as a temporary transit or a passage to European southern regions. So European Union and countries realized in the last years that they have to do much more than strengthening security measures to prevent illegal immigrations into their region, but to assist African countries to make real development in terms of economies from one side, and also support them in bringing about peace and stability to these countries that suffer from trouble. It's not an easy challenge, but I think we have to build on that sincere and serious will of European Union and European countries, and to strengthen mutual relations and make stronger bridges of sustainable development in the African continent.
Dr. Ibrahim Al-Ghazawi, Professor of International Relations, thank you very much for joining us. So, Doctor, we have always talked about that we can never just put political issues alone or separate political and economic issues. Definitely both are moving parallel to each other.
Yeah, there are two sides of one coin, actually, nowadays, specifically. Taking into consideration what we can see nowadays in the world, we can see that quite important, you know, you know, the issue is that economic is affected seriously by the political side, and vice versa.
And the president also talked about, or actually tackled the file of terrorism and how important it is the collaboration in confronting terrorism and extremism. And definitely we can never achieve stability in the region or economic stability, of course, without confronting this important
yes. This is one of the major challenge confronting Africa: terrorism and you know, conflicts. You know, you can see to how extent all around Africa, and a lot of studies actually has mentioned the impact, the impact of these two factors on the growth of Africa. $billions Africa has lost during or due to such two reasons. So I believe that by addressing these challenges, and you know, from my point of view, development is going to address such a challenge, because when you have poverty, when you have you know, the educational system are not and democracy and so on, all these factors, when you enhance the economic situation of people, you can address all these challenges, and we have a lot of experiences that proved that. So hopefully, with the free trade area coming into activation for the coming period, and with more efforts to be exerted regarding economic activity, small project addressing poverty, economic empowerment of poor people, addressing women in the continent. Actually, women can play a significant role towards changing, you know, changing the social, political, and economic side. So all these factors need a lot of work to be done in the continent, and by such cooperation, actually, maybe we can do something.
Doctor, how do you see the potentialities when it comes to the exchange between Brussels and Egypt? Definitely, each country, if we're talking about win-win policy, and each country has its strength in a particular part. So if we're talking about the potentialities that we have.
The potentialities are huge, actually, but we need to specify what are the projects that we have a comparative advantage. We need to activate.
What is our competitive advantage, if I can put it like this?
In Egypt, we have a lot of product, according to our studies, ready-made clothes. We have food industries. We have leather product. We have furniture. Even in electronics, we have a comparative advantage in electronics. So a lot of industries in services too. Tourism to be activated. I don't think we have a lot of tourism coming from Brussels. We need to activate tourism. We need to activate, information technology regarding renewable energy, regarding green economy. So a lot can be done regarding, enhancing investment coming from Brussels and from all European countries, because Brussels actually is representing the EU.
Right. Dr. Youmn Hamaki, Professor of Economics at Shams University, thank you very much for joining us. And moving on to some light news, and we'll be back.